Hello, everybody. This is Paul Braren. I'm here on our TinkerTry live event with Veeam tonight. And before we get started with the mild grilling I'll be giving Rick tonight, I have some thoughts. What led us to this evening here, where I want to paint an impression of where I see their home backup solution. And I'll paint sort of a landscape, and then Rick, I'll ask you to sort of color in the lines for us to get an idea of what Veeam has in store for us in 2005. So how you doing, Rick?
How about 2015? 2005 is a long time ago, Paul.
Ooh, a little jump back in my brain there. So 2015, next year is what we're talking about here. It's just before the holidays now. So here it is, December 22nd. And this is rather timely, Rick, because what people tend to do this time of year, as you know, a bit of cleanup, backing up, helping friends and family. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But my background and why am I talking about this with Veeam tonight? Well, that's what I want to get into. My own stories go back to 2007 with about 3 terabytes of home videos and so forth to back up. Cloud was not something you could do. There wasn't anywhere near a fat enough pipe, and I didn't really want to put it anywhere outside of my house anyway. So Windows Home Server was the thing back then. 2007 is the year for that, when it all started with Home Server Show and podcasts coming out and a community that was largely around HP microservers and so forth. Now, there's a lot of other machines people would stick Windows Home Server on, and it's been a pretty good run, 7-8 years. But the last 2 years have been a little bit dicier for me. I'm up to about 4.5 terabytes of data that's backed up. It's 14 machines, so it's quite a challenge where 2/3 of those machines are over VPN. They're not even in my home. Okay, so I'm finding over the last 2 years, at least half those machines are missing a backup, a daily backup for one reason or another. Hotfix from Microsoft, I got to reconfigure the backup that mysteriously disappeared. Just a number of annoyances that have meant I'm now fiddling with something was supposed to be set and forget. And it largely was, up until maybe last year. And R2's been good until the last year. It's gotten not so good as far as reliability. Lots of power, lots of bells and whistles, lots of tunability, and a central interface. We'll talk about that too. But not so good as far as just getting the job done. So, if you visited TinkerTry before, you know I've written a lot about Windows Server 2012 R2 and how to make it work like Home Server, the beloved Home Server product of 2007, which was very simple, meant to be affordable and reliable and cheap. As it grew into a more enterprise-y focused, or at least small business focused product, R2, it became more pricey, and you had to spend $200 or $300 every year to do a rip or replace, and not really an upgrade install. And then finally, there were some of my goofy articles to try to make it not join a domain, try to have it not point to your home's DNS, so that when your dad or your brother was in their house trying to surf the web and you were shutting your server down, they could still surf the web. You didn't want that enterprise-y stuff. So I kind of jury-rigged it, finagled it, hacked it, whatever you want to call it. I tweaked the registry during the middle of the install and told people how to do this, and bought myself another year or two of fairly smooth sailing with Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials, that mouthful of a product. So that brings me to today. This new kid on the block, this new kid on the storage block, this new kid on the block storage. I don't know.
New kid on the endpoint block. How about that?
Perfect. So Rick Vanover. Rick, if you can introduce yourself and your full title, which I believe is Product Strategy Specialist and Community Manager at Veeam. Did I get that right, Rick?
Yeah, that's right. Product Strategy Specialist. A product strategy team is best described as technical marketing or the evangelist group here at Veeam. I'm on a global team of 6 people, and basically we are kind of like that first sharp edge of the sword to get the word out for things, aside from the Veeam forums, of course. But anyways, my other role is community manager, and that's an emerging role that I'm tasked with of everything from what I do already with social media, but additionally we've got a huge program planned for next year. Stay tuned for that. But I do a lot of different stuff, basically an evangelist type role.
Well, thank you, Rick. I can see the large quantity of lanyards hanging over your shoulder there.
I love lanyards. Every event I go to goes to the monster pile of lanyards, and I have one heck one heck of a nail if they're hanging on to all of those.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, me, not so many lanyards. Wife's not so thrilled with me keeping the house cluttered with stuff, but I do get around to user groups, at least 3 or 4 a year here in the Northeast. So I'm in Connecticut. Rick, tell us where you're at.
I'm based in Columbus, Ohio, yet, like I said, I am on a global team. So at Veeam, our America's headquarters is based here in Columbus, and that's where I'm at. And I've traveled to many of the Veeam offices, large events around the world. If Veeam's going to be there, you'll find us. But, you know, when you hear of Veeam, those of you who are familiar with, like, business, data center, virtualized environments, Veeam might be a household name. Well, what we're going to talk about tonight hopefully will put us into a new kind of ecosphere that we can make Veeam a household name literally on the endpoint. So hopefully we can find our way into some new circles now, Paul.
Yeah, so Rick, so full disclosure, my site's about home virtualization and storage and backup. Those are right in my tagline, right? At TinkerTry IT at home, or try it at home. Efficient virtualization, storage, backup, and more. So I've been talking about this stuff for 3.5 years, well before I had any advertisers on my site. Veeam happens to be one of them at the moment. And I've been doing consulting for my day job, IBM, for over 20 years. So what gets, and I'm wearing a VMware shirt, I go to a lot of virtualization user group meetings that include Hyper-V. VirtG is one of those here in the Northeast. That's big. I'm coming up on a winter warmer in January. 1,100 IT pros will be hanging out at Gillette Stadium, for instance. So I see myself as an IT pro for, decades now, and that leads us to, let's say, in year 2007, I mentioned earlier, doing some consulting. Veeam Fast SCP. That's where I first heard of your company and the green logo. That really saved my skin on dozens of occasions. I'd be out at a customer site, and I'd need to move code fast, like Windows Server 2003 or Windows 2008 server. Those are big ISO files, and they took forever by default when you did a brand new install of ESXi at a customer center. So when you have a bunch of people twiddling their thumbs, you want to shove up that ISO in about 1/6 to 1/8 the time. So Veeam Fast SCP became my friend. That's that foot in the door approach. Yeah, go ahead.
A comment on that, and then even still today, the Fast SCP has been morphed into our backup free edition for the virtualized environments. Still today, Fast SCP Editor is the quickest way to edit a VMX file. Folks, you don't need to use VI, you don't need to move it out, save it, edit it, and move it back. Use the Fast SCP Editor. That's that tool, and it's moved into the backup free edition, but everybody knows about that problem in the early days of vSphere, and we've all got our stories. But a little note that editing the VMX file still is easiest with Fast SCP.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So that's how they became my crosshairs. That was largely enterprisey stuff from there, and my site is not about that. It's about IT pros trying to simplify their home life, which largely involves helping family and friends with PCs. When they hear you work on computers, they don't care what kind of computers you work on. They just hear computers and can ask you for help. And I like helping people. That's probably what bloggers tend to be like, and people like Rick. So that's what caught my attention with this product. Very much the same goal of what Microsoft set out to do in 2007 with Windows Home Server. It seems like here we are in 2014. I got the year right this time, live on the air, Rick. Can't edit that 2000. The thing I said at the beginning of the podcast. But anyhow, getting into this here, I want to talk about the beta, right? Now, there's a few exciting things about the beta. I've already laid the groundwork that, yes, simple is the key operating word here. And yes, maybe I'll be able to back up 14 machines and have all of them actually finish the backup every night, maybe even for months without me thinking about it. That would be pretty cool. Now, we're early yet. It's still beta. But what happened recently is this product was announced as a beta in October. Two pieces of the announcement really caught my eye. One was that you were doing some demos in December, which I've attended, and the other was that you're giving away the most expensive giveaway I've ever heard of for beta testing. And I've been doing this for 20 years. I mean, most of the time I'm not eligible for any kind of funding for beta testing. I volunteer to do it. But Rick, just tell the people listening, if they haven't noticed, the opportunity they have from now till January 20th, 2015.
So with Veeam Endpoint Beta, this is truly an opportunity for the IT community to not just do some work, but also get rewarded. So specifically, we are going to give away 6 Surface Pro 3 tablets to what we call the All-Star Beta Testers. Now, an all-star beta tester are those who come up with the best new feature idea. In fact, it's very active on the forums right now with some great suggestions. Additionally, the best product use case story. And we're going to talk about some of the use cases here, so nobody can win based on my ideas if we get to that. And then third, kind of a tricky one, most hidden bug. Now, guys, I won't lie, this is a beta, and it's impossible from a QA standpoint to simulate everything that the public will have in the scope of an endpoint. PCs, maybe home servers, those types of platforms, it's impossible for us to simulate all the different hardware, and honestly, a pretty broad offering of Windows. So with Windows 7 and higher, 2008 R2 and higher. That is actually a pretty broad footprint. And those of you familiar with Veeam, this does not require the system to be virtualized. Yet it includes recovery to bare metal. So here it is. If you go to Paul's site, he's got a blog that talks about this. Is also, you can't miss it at veeam.com. But 6 Surface Pro 3 tablets for those categories, what we call our all-star beta testers. So we want people to get their hands dirty. We want people to find the use cases. We want people to come up with their ideas, get a sense of how it works and share that with the community. I think everyone can win, but in the end, everyone gets their backup problems on those endpoints at home solved with incredible ease. And it's important to note this is a free product, and a lot of times people might think, well, it's free for now and then you're gonna sock it to me at the end. Not so much. Take note, everyone, that this endpoint backup will always have a free edition. So there will always be at least a free edition, and if you look at our prior behavior in other products, our data center backup product with Veeam Backup and Replication has a free edition. Our monitoring solution, Veeam 1, has a free edition. Some community resources like our stencils, our extended generic report libraries for System Center. Free is very much central to the strategy. We want to win the hearts and minds of IT pros around the world. Here's a new tool to do just that.
Thank you, Rick. So I was showing off the sign-up site and how to get to the code. And January 20th is the cutoff date. Is that correct? I read that about a week ago.
Well, the submissions are accepted through the 20th, and then the winner selection, there will be 6 that start the week of December 22nd this week through the week of the 26th. So winners should be named soon. I can tell you the product management team, GoStev, if you use the Veeam forums, they are all over this, and they will be looking at absolutely everything that people say. So the forums are a good place to share that, but you got to download it. You got to give it a try. And then these ideas of, use case,
all right, thank you.
Idea and the bugs. So it's only going to happen if people use it.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. So right now I've got it on the screen. I'm sharing out. There's the dates that Rick just explained. 1 per week, starting now, this week of December 22nd that we're in, through January 26th, we'll be announcing the winner. So, no, that's just impressive, the sheer quantity. So that leads me to how I met your colleague, Mike Ressler, and you're a Microsoft evangelist over in Belgium at Veeam. And I was in touch with him partly because I started blogging about it, interested, but I, like many, was in the queue waiting for beta code. So, Rick, can you give us some idea? When I see numbers like 7,000 new beta download invites went out last Tuesday, I think it was, it gives me a hint that, wow, that's a lot of beta testers you have. Do you have some sense of how many you have total? Are you able to share that?
So, not that I can share, but let me tell you the process. So this page right here at the very top, you could sign up. And right now, for the entire public, folks, you can download it today. Just go to this page, drop in an email address, and you'll have it in your hand. Now, the reason why we staggered those downloads, for one, is we provide technical support. So we cannot overwhelm technical support based on the interest of this. And I think by all measures, this has been the most popular Veeam announcement of all time. The one measure I'm thinking of in particular is stars on blog post. And this is one of those things, Paul, that is the absolute most requested feature from our customers and partners, period. So last year, I used to say that when we added tape, right, that was the most, for the data center backup product, that was the most requested feature. This is now the newest, most requested feature. So it's very much a measure of both listening to what customers and partners want, but also still allowing us to, find new areas and win the hearts and minds of those IT pros around the world.
Yeah. So Rick, as Mike introduced me to you, in the recent weeks, it was only about a week and a half ago, we decided let's just do a Google Live Hangout. And why? Well, we can get live questions and we can show our desktops. So I've got everything set up, and Google Hangouts live events now allow me to show a rather clear desktop where you can actually read the font and see it on YouTube with no editing. So that's why I had the crazy idea to let's just do this live. And we want to show you some stuff tonight here. So before I get into showing my desktop, Rick, you also have some goodies in your home lab. So let's start with your home lab. I'll tell you a little bit about mine, then we'll get into some knowing the code. Go ahead, Rick.
The home lab phenomena, we all have it, right? We all either support our family and friends, especially going into the holidays, right? You're going to get those questions. How do I back up? Folks, just go to the Veeam site, download endpoint. You can put it on any removable drive. It couldn't be easier. But yeah, so Paul and I were prepping for the show. Back in the cave there is the home lab. I've got 4 servers. I've got an HP, I've got a Lenovo, I've got a Dell, I've got my old laptop, my old Veeam laptop is, I have an SSD in it. It's the 4th host, 2 Hyper-V, 2 VMware. Right here I've got a Lenovo desktop. And in fact, personal fail, I did Windows Update right before the show because just this weekend I installed Windows 8.1. I'm modernizing some things here in the home lab. Not a good time to do Windows Update right before a podcast because I was wanting to show endpoint on this. Paul luckily has me backed up. I got the Surface right here. Paul and I are keeping on chat there. And then if I turn over to the other side, I've got my TV. I'll be watching Monday Night Football here in a bit, and can't quite see it, but I've got one of my backup resources there, the Drobo, and then down below.
Yeah, we see it.
Yep. And here's this is my favorite one. That's the I/O safe. I've got 2 different I/O safes that are those fireproof hard drives. Those are a really good place to put your backup there. They have some that are NAS models based on Synology. And this particular one is a USB 2 or maybe USB 3 or maybe either. But basically USB model. And these things are fireproof and waterproof, especially for the home use case. You might not have the bandwidth to move all of this off-site. Those I/O safe devices are great, and what I really like about them, Paul, is that they come with a forensic data recovery service should the worst happen to those drives. I don't know if you've covered them or bounced in through the I/O safe line.
No, Rick, it's funny you mentioned that. So Dave McCabe, one of his early claim to fame experiences at CES, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, was torching things with I/O safe people out in the parking lots of CS. It was hilarious. So if you ever saw, or in his backyard at one point. So there's some pretty cool videos he did with those guys. So we know that company well, people who have listened to Home Server Show podcasts like myself for about 7 years
and
now.
I've got a little bit of everything, and basically I don't have the bandwidth to move everything to a cloud or such. So those I/O safe devices, and I have 2 of them, those are really kind of, a really good strategy, I think, for the money, for the scenario, and most importantly for the ease of use.
Thank you for showing us your lab. I really appreciate that. And you mentioned Windows and the updates. Oh boy, there's a lot of them since October. So I'm curious. There was a new build called 9879, and I'm about to post an article just simply telling people where's that URL. It's less obvious than the first builds. That way you don't have 2 waves of 30 or 40 Windows updates to endure. So that's the typical kind of stuff I publish, right? Timely info on the stuff people are horsing around with in their home labs, particularly around holidays. So these are exciting times. Windows 10 looks pretty good, and the later beta had some bugs, but I got past those, and that works quite well too. Even with your beta. So here we are, beta on beta. We got Veeam endpoint backup free beta working with Windows 10 beta. Those two betas work together, and I've actually got backups, including full bare metal restores. So I have a series of videos, and if you're listening to this while driving or whatnot, you go to TinkerTry.com, upper right corner super guides. There it is. All my links to all the Veeam articles, as well as other home server kind of solutions. So super guides are kind of my index, my starting point to all I've published so far in a particular product. That's one of my focus areas these last 3.5 years of writing about these sort of things. So Rick, you mentioned your lab. What is in your laptop? How much RAM did you jam into that Lenovo? Just curious.
Well, it was corporate spec, so it's not
Okay.
as as awesome as it could be, but I want to say it's 32 gig, so it may be 16. I'll be
Yep.
honest with you, Paul. I actually travel most of the time with the Surface here because, for me, everything I do is back in a data center. The device, the endpoint, really doesn't matter for me. However, like at home, I've got, the dual screen Lenovo. I've got my wife's PC upstairs. I can't have any problems with that, right? I do have some endpoints. I mean, I've invested a lot in data center, but I still have the endpoints. My work laptop, my email PSTs. I've built a lot around my data center, availability strategy, but when it comes to the endpoints, I still have needs, and endpoint backup is really helping me out there.
All right, so you shared your lab. I'll share mine. We'll go back to those endpoints, particularly modern stuff like Lenovo Yogas with the UEFI BIOS that I play with in my house, or a Surface Pro 3 that you guys are giving away that I imagine Veeam can handle backing up and bare metal restore. And
Not just a Surface Pro 3, but 6 Surface Pro 3s.
you're giving away 6 of them, yep. And then
6 of them.
now Surface Pro 2 and other full Windows versions, you can do full backup and restore. You said that somewhere in one of our chats, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very important to note that it has to be the full Intel processor, so the RTs are not supported for endpoint. And it comes down to processor capabilities, installable subcomponents, and the like.
Yep. Okay. So in my home lab, back in 2011 when I started my site, it was about throwing a bit of a RAID array in a single ESXi host and letting a machine run at under 100 watts full-time 24/7 to remove the guilt of the occasional 600-watt dual power supply server I get as a hand-me-down from work that a lot of IT pros have. So that got old quickly, heating up the basement, the electric bills. If you left that running, would be between $600 and $800 a year here in Connecticut. Not good in any way. So getting a Core i7 with 32 gig of RAM on a commodity motherboard that was under 300 and a Core i7 under 300, and eventually the RAM a year later in 2012 also under 300, it's awesome. I'm now coming up on 4 years of success with my home build that is just continuing to rock. Every 6 months or so I'll shut it down, get some dust out of there, and fire it up again. So it's been really good to have 32 gig of RAM at an affordable price point that doesn't heat up my home and use up that much electricity. So that's been the mothership. That's what everyone's backing up to. So I'm running ESXi 5.5. It's hosting my Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials. It's a thinly provisioned VM with a ridiculously sized 62 terabyte drive where my backups are held. It's thin, right? I don't really have that much storage. I have about 5 physical terabytes in a RAID 5. So that's my home lab. It's down in the basement from where I am now, and I keep the heat out of the room I'm in. This is where I'm working. You can actually see a bit of this. Oh, I got your face showing. Let me turn on so mine shows. Here's a monitor on the left. I got a 2560 by 1440 bigger monitor in the middle and another 1920 by 1080 monitor on the right. And this is where I try to keep the heat gain low with a modest laptop, a ThinkPad W520. What model is yours, Rick?
T430, not too fancy.
Okay. So yeah, no, within like 2 years, I think, maybe 3. And the most I could get to is 16 gig of RAM. What I do, though, is I've got 7.8 million pixels in these 3 screens. And then my corporate build is a Windows 7 VM running on Windows version of VMware's Workstation 11 product. So what is it? Why would I run it locally? Well, because I sometimes hit the road too, Rick. and sometimes the internet's crummy. I just spent a month in Germany, for instance. So I really needed a 1 terabyte SSD. These little boxes. You were talking about SSDs and some goodies you just bought, Rick. Here's my little props here. Yeah, I've been a fan of Samsung. There's lots of brands, of course. And I got a 1 terabyte SATA Samsung just before flying to Germany. Boy, am I glad I did. You, Rick, you were sharing earlier, just before we went on the air, you just bought some stuff lately. SSDs are
So
wonderful, right, in a home lab.
yeah, let me if I'll go get the model, but it's the
It's okay.
Micron Enterprise SSD, 800 gigs. I forget the model. I got two of those. One for the laptop, and actually, stay tuned, folks, to the Veeam blog. I'm actually going to do a blog where I back up this Win 7 laptop, and now I will eventually go to Win 8, but I almost think it's a better use case if I back up this laptop I'm talking to you on with all the software that I have on it from all the years of using it, all the different hardware plugged in over those years. I'm going to back it up to actually one of two different media, and then I'm going to restore it to the new SSD. So I'm actually going to use it as a migration scenario to an SSD, but I think it's almost better with, and granted, this is just my personal laptop. I'm going to add it up here. I have a 450 gig rotational drive now, and I only have 80 gigs free. So I've got a lot of data for one single laptop to go out and back, and I'm going to do it all with Veeam endpoint. So I'm going to put it to the test. I'm sure this laptop's a holy mess, so we'll see how it does, and I'm going to make a video blog on that at veeam.com.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rick. We've both been kicking the tires a bit, and thank you for that preview of what you're up to next. One of my videos was about Windows 10, which I already mentioned that I've been playing with the beta and finding on a 7-year-old ThinkPad T61P that's right next to me here. It's not really easy to move my camera, but that has a KVM over IP device, meaning I could install Veeam, back it up, which I showed on the video, but then I could reboot the laptop and restore it from bare metal, meaning it found the network share booting off of the USB key that Veeam's endpoint backup built for me, which found the right network driver, found the mass storage, found the local hard drive, and restored Windows 10. And boom, that worked. Did the same thing with Windows 8.1. Worked fine. My story just now, it's a 7-year-old laptop with SATA 2, so it's limited. But you put a Samsung in there with their rapid utility to basically fake more like SATA 3 speeds for little files out of cache and so forth, using a RAM disk basically. And it really breathes a lot of new life into a 7-year-old laptop. It's amazing what I can do with friends and family's machines. Say, hey, you want to get a 128 or 256 gig SSD for well under 100? I will make your machine 2 to 3 times faster. And I've been using products like Macrium, or now Veeam going forward perhaps, or Windows Home Server. Lots of ways to restore to a small hard drive. So, Rick, you talk to that. When you have a laptop that probably came out of your local Staples or Costco or Sam's Club for 400, 500 bucks, it probably has a 500 gig hard drive in there spinning, not a solid state. You offer to a friend and family, okay, a $80 Christmas gift. You stick in the hard drive and you want to restore that backup of their spinny drive. That's a challenge because they might have, let's say 200 gig of data, which will take a while, and you want to restore that to their new 256 gig SSD. How does Veeam Endpoint Backup do with that, Rick?
So, I just went through this personally with my family, and I hope you can see it all here, but this is just a regular USB cable. It's not the one that would go on an Android phone, but kind of the one that is more fixed and then it indents in. But basically, I have this nice little Kingston case here, and this Kingston case here will accept a SATA drive. And what I would do is take whatever rotational drive that I have sitting around, and I would put it in here, and I would put this cover on, and then basically what I have here is a rotational drive in this transportable case. And for most of the Kingston SSDs that you buy, they actually come with this cute little case, which is very handy for those migration scenarios. Then you hook up this cable, it becomes a USB drive, and what I actually did in that exact scenario, Paul, of buying, the prices on low capacity SSD drives, do a little bit of cleanup. You don't really have to migrate and reinstall all their apps. And this is with my sister-in-law, and her PC was maybe 5 years old, and I made that same promise. Small purchase here. we can really boost the performance of your laptop, took a backup to a rotational drive that I had sitting around, then restored it back to the SSD. An unbelievable difference when it comes to not so much reads and writes, but Paul, where I think it makes the biggest difference is if that Windows environment has to do any swapping, it's going to be on an SSD. So there's never enough RAM in an older PC. So the swapping on an SSD is making an incredible difference. But the migration, which took us to that benefit of having really good performance, started with doing a Veeam endpoint backup to one of these little enclosures like this one from Kingston, and there's scores of other ones that have a small SATA interface, hook up a USB cable, and it really makes it show up as a local drive. And then from there, I'll put a Veeam backup on that, excuse me, launch that restore that you talked about, drop it back onto the new drive, problem solved.
Excellent point, Rick. And that I have the same enclosure myself. I bought a Kingston a few years, and it came with the solid state drive, right, and cloning software. But that enclosure came in handy. A little more recently, I went with a little simpler devices. Then I sent my kids to college with a USB version, blue here, and laptop style interface there. And then now, flash forward to today, and the latest and greatest would be called a UASP, SATA to USB 3 converter. Let me show it on my desktop, one example. And I do plan to give some tests there where external USB 3 enclosures that Veeam endpoint backup free can essentially clone to or do its bare metal full system backup to and restore from. So that's a really nifty way to move data when you're updating to SSD, or just a full DR plan if someone's maybe away at college or whatever. Those are also the things you think about this time of year. Including my home. What do I do with my kids at a distant university if something really bad happens? So this could be another stocking stuffer, very practical gift. A whopping $18 gets you a cable with the fastest possible ability for you to be the hero in your IT. As an IT pro, a hero in your non-IT professional friends and family, right? A modest thing that you might buy to keep in your toolkit, so that when you try to do a clone, maybe even on a holiday, you can do it while they're at their house and quicker. I would say most backups, like the one I did over the network, you're looking at around an hour if you have decent speed hard drives that you're backing up to and from, whether it's a network share or a local USB 2.0. So
just enough time to watch, just enough time to watch a football game, if you ask me.
Yeah, good point. Which I think you're thinking of one later tonight. So
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So let's sum that up then. So Veeam endpoint backup. Its backup targets. There's one that we haven't talked about that is, again, the darling of the home server show type of people, or the average guy.tv podcast listeners, who hear a lot about NAS devices. So Rick, you've got a NAS, any old brand. We saw Drobo over your shoulder. Tell us about what using Veeam endpoint looks like when backing up to a NAS. Well, I do it, so I'm going to show it my desktop now. People have seen enough of
cool.
So face.
This is a unique one, guys. Paul's going to show, and I'm going to narrate. But we wanted some storage agnosticism when it comes to setting up the backup jobs. So basically, Paul's going to hit Configure Backup here, and basically there's one. It's running now, but let's take a look at that job here, and it's in the.
Sorry, let's start that again. Yep.
Yeah. Let's jump into Configure Backup, and basically it's going to scan for the fixed local disks, and you have three options right away. Do you want to back up the whole computer, maybe just the C drive and the other drive, or maybe just the other drive, whenever you have some options, or even more specifically, the specific file. So if you think about this, we want the default. The default is entire computer to be the most protective situation. So from top to down, it's most safeguarded approach down to most advanced, if that makes any sense. So let's go to the next option here. And when we select destination, there's three options. You might notice that one is grayed out, folks. That is the features that are coming to put these backups in the managed constructs of Veeam Backup and Replication. The phrase repository is basically a container where we put the Veeam backups for the data center. There will be some cross collaboration between the products. Stay tuned, but it's important to note that the end result is what's called a VBK, a Veeam backup file. That is something that Veeam backup and replication can move around. But these first two options, local drive, if you have a USB stick, the one that I showed, the enclosure would work. The interface cable that Paul showed is a great example as well. But for many people, there is some sort of shared storage in the home, especially the smart user. Like most of the people on this show. So the shared folder is basically CIFS or SMB, and I'm going to skip the academic debate on what it should really be called. But if we go to the next part of the wizard here, we'll see what I mean by that. Basically, it's the / name or IP and then a share. That's where we're going to. And we can actually resolve this if you want to go one step further. This could even be like V letter $ or C $ of a different system. If you have a system that has a bunch of storage that you want to back up, you can actually go ahead and put it to a Windows system as well. So this particular NAS resource at Test Share has plenty, 62 terabytes of space, and as you see, Paul's dropped in some credentials. Now, the most important safeguard I want to talk about is on this screen. That default number of 14 restore points. That's I'm going to explain that here. The 14 restore points are kind of a keep restore points for 14 days, and the schedule becomes kind of a multiplier between. It doesn't mean we're going to have 14 restore points. It means we're going to have 14 days of restore points, and then in a day we may have more than one restore point. So if you think about your personal retention policy, if you have on your PC a need, or maybe if this is a server class OS, if you have a need for long retention, you want to give some special attention to this particular number. And let's go to the next part of the wizard, Paul. And what we'll see here is how that is multiplied out. Now, Paul's taken the default option, daily at a time, and I do believe 12:30 a.m. is the default time. But that's what I want to call option A. But options B, C, and D you can also use in conjunction if you lock your computer and walk away. Let's do a backup. Or if you log off. Or if your removable media arrives, this is kind of cute, do a backup. So some flexible options. So again, the most protective option is a default. 12:30 a.m. But I like all these ideas, but let's not think too hard. That very last option, don't do a backup in any more than every 2 hours. But when it comes to a backup, it's important to note that the backup actually doesn't move all the data. We actually have what's called a changed block tracking transfer engine. So the processing engine, when it looks at the source volumes, it's actually using some of the stuff we've learned in our data center product, and it's actually only moving blocks that have changed. And when I say blocks, I don't necessarily mean new files, or if you're familiar with the archive bit. Trust me, folks, we're working kind of down a layer a bit, and we're constructing the file system based on this this transfer engine. It's very advanced, and it's built on really proven data center technology. So if you look here, you're going to see Veeam Endpoint Backup as a Windows service. There is a small database, but what we call the Express Local DB, that coordinates the jobs, and then the Windows service, the Veeam Endpoint Backup service, are really the core components to this protection algorithm. And then from there, that's it. So the next part of the wizard just summarizes this information, and then from there we can finish it. And go ahead and click a run, and basically what it's going to do, this backup job has run 3 times. Last time it ran was 3 days ago, and Paul's like me, keeps a lot of different environments with a lot of different use cases powered on. And you see the first backup on the far left took 16 minutes. And then the second backup was an incremental, and it took 2.8. Now this has been 3 days. It might have a little bit more, but we have some intelligence in our processing engine. It's advanced from all the different data center products we've been doing. You're going to see CPU spike. That's really the one thing we're going to use the most of, is the processor to do these backups. And if Paul, if we go over to let's go to the settings tab of the endpoint console. A couple other things you might want to just notice is, again, these are good defaults, but I like that safeguard, throttle backup activity when the system is busy. That makes perfect sense if you ask me. Don't slow things down when it's busy, like maybe if I'm rendering a video. it's not a good time to take a backup. CPU spiked pretty hard here. We just crossed 70, 90% or so. But basically, it's going to be almost done. If you click through a couple more of these tabs here, Paul, let's see what else we have. We can launch into the requisite support mechanisms, including the forums, which is where you can win those surfaces. And the last tab there, the update tab, you can do online updates. Now, this is functionality that is not working, is not enabled, I should say, due to it being a beta. So you're going to want to drive back to veeam.com and check for that, and we'll announce how you would go about that as you go. But basically, a little bit of read, a little bit of CPU, a little bit of throughput if you're going to a network. Makes sense as we do the backup, and based on the previous run, it was only yet just a few minutes, and we're a couple minutes in, good 20-some, 30% done, 60% done, flying quickly away. And once it's done here, we'll show you that bit that I was talking about the block tracking here. So the block tracking, Paul, let's explain that for a second. You and I, both in our professional roles and enterprise data center technology, that makes a big difference when it comes to moving data. VMware introduced that platform with vSphere 4 and CBT, and then we made a similar technology with Hyper-V. And if you've ever worked with any enterprise storage systems, you know that they work based on differencing deltas of low-level file system stuff. So changed blocks, no matter how they're implemented, are a serious incremental improvement technique for storage. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, my home story of 7 years of backing up a lot of data, Microsoft's product acts very similarly. It's checking what blocks have changed since the last backup. It's CPU intense at the beginning, but they don't have a throttle back solution. So if you're using the computer during those first 2 minutes, if it's more than 4 years old, you'll probably notice it dragging, especially if you're rendering video. I like the fact that you guys have automatic by default set so that you can, chill a little bit, back off if I'm busy using my machine. Now today for this video, I didn't touch the mouse, I was doing nothing. This was an idle Windows 10 build that is now done, and the CPU is settled down, and it finished in 4 minutes.
Yeah, click on that.
I like it when you get into the weeds. Keep doing it. This is great.
Yeah.
Telling me about the database and all. We're going to click on that.
Yeah, click on the 4 minutes there. This is the bit that matters here. That long line, system reserved disks. We're able to read it on this system at 16 megabytes per second. And it does indicate that it was able to use its changed block tracking. So basically, of your the disk geometry, 350 megs that or gigs. Wait, 350 megabytes, and then on your larger volume, 2.5 gig out of 90 gig were read. So from the larger 90 gig drive, there were only 2.5 gig of changed data in a small surface area in the C drive, and that's the one that matters. So basically what happened is we traversed the approximate 90 gigs of disk geometry, and we found those 2.5 gig of change data, and we reconstructed this file system in a recoverable manner on the NAS. So if you say, well, Veeam, you only moved 2.5 gig. Well, yeah, okay, true. That and a little bit more, but we have all these great recovery options. We have all this, basically the entire system, in particular the file system, are constructed on the NAS, so you can do, let's see, you can do whole VM recovery, bare metal recovery. You can bring back a certain drive. I think you can bring back just a system state. And this can all be done from creatable boot media. So it's very powerful in the restore engine, very versatile in that you can get out of a lot of different problems. So, for what it is, again, free, solving a problem for the endpoint, and those of us that have to go home and do tech support these days for our family, I think it solves a real need, and I encourage everyone to give it a kick at home or tinker with it, give it a try, as it were, and see what you find, and you might just win. But things to look for, right? We're going to have hooks into the data center product, as you see with the endpoint, the hook as a target going to backup and replication. There'll be a couple more things coming. but you're going to see in the first part of next year. So I don't want to say January, I want to say Q1, but I'm telling you it's going to be soon. We're going to see this go out of beta and go into a GA product, and there will still be support. The support is not just for the beta, so it's very important to note that. And you'll see it go into a supported platform. You're going to have a very active community on the forums, and why we release those betas in the waves was for support. We didn't want them overwhelmed. Who knows what we would have found. It actually went better than planned, so that's why they accelerated, and then there were 7,000, and then it went to open. So now it's an open beta. And honestly, those of you who have followed Veeam, that's never happened. But once you download and install, this is the first thing you want to do, and create this recovery media, which will basically include the drivers from this computer and build out your basically most people want to just do a USB bootable disk that would launch a Windows recovery environment. It's very easy. Now the only catch is you're probably going to lose what's on that disk. It's going to be formatted. So don't use your everything USB for that, because it's going to format it as a bootable thing. The bootable.
I just stuck one in.
Yeah, there you go.
Right on. Yep.
And if you're at a Veeam event, folks, stop by our booth. We hand out, let me see if I have one sitting right here. Yep, I do. Well, we're sharing Paul's video, but we have these Veeam Zip USB keys, which...
I can show you. There we go.
Oh.
There's Rick. Oh, Rick, hang on a second. We muted your audio somehow.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, you're back. You were saying?
But basically, if you go to an event from Veeam around the world, chances are we'll be handing out 8 gig USB stick, and these are really versatile because they can be used to either take a backup or make this recovery media. So 8 gig is a perfect size for this type of thing, and it's just as easy to create that media, which literally it'll image that drive, and then you'll be on your way.
Yeah, Rick, let's talk about that just for a little bit, and as we kind of bring this in for a landing, as Jim Collison would say, as we near the end of the podcast, I want to mention my site has a little ticker tape at the top saying live event, right? We're getting nearing the end, and I've opened it up for questions, so we'll see who's joined us live. We have a few viewers. But to wrap things up here, this media it's creating, right, as Rick said, basically you could think of Veeam as a really slick backup skin, meaning the later versions of Windows 8 and later have some backup. It's not that simple to use as far as setting up network shares or creating recovery media that's always going to work. And I've created Windows PE, WinP, not Linux. This is a Windows-based boot USB key that this is making. I've created those, and I've tweaked them over the years. And back in like 2007, 2008, you needed to be a Microsoft Developer Network. You needed the Windows Automated Install Kit, AIK. You need to read some stuff to inject drivers in there. A bit of a pain. It's really cool that they've added a very friendly skin to this, right? You do a next install, you get this friendly green GUI, and then it pops up, create recovery media. You shove in a USB key, and given it's 8 gig in size, that's going to handle anything out there, I would think. And now your boot environment is very Windowsy, and that leads me to this screenshot on the right. So here's one of my articles in the super guide. And there's video of it. There's a screenshot of an endpoint recovery. What does it look like to restore an actual Lenovo T60 laptop, a T61P laptop, a modest laptop from 7 years ago? I actually show you how straightforward it is to restore Windows on it. Now, so Rick and I got into the weeds, but this is the GUI. Nobody, like your mom or your brother, needs to click on this stuff. This is more for us propeller heads that want to see how long did it take and what happens in the process, because you saw Rick and I were looking at Task Manager. The product doesn't need you to look at that, obviously. You don't even need to bring up this UI. All your mother, brother, whoever would see is this little icon in the tray. They hover their mouse over it, maybe you're on the phone on one day, and it says, yeah, it's all set for backups every day at 12:30 a.m. There's no red X through it, and if it is backing up, they see a little spinning green wheel on it. You might have noticed earlier in the video. Let me make sure I'm sharing out my desk. Nope.
Yeah, you are. Oh, you were.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's my look at it, and I want it to be a teaser today, and I think we've given a good overview, Rick, that it's simple for the end user. It's minimal on resources if they're trying to use the laptop at the time it's doing a backup. It's versatile as far as choice, And it has the little geeky bells and whistles. If you just one click away, you can see how long the backup took. One of the frustrations I had with Microsoft's Windows Server, given all its cost, it didn't actually have an easy way to do that, to see when the backup started and stopped. You had to look at the file system to see the first file and last file written. That seemed kind of silly. No one ever came out with a plugin or add-in to just give you a friendly way to see, because that's usually a sign of trouble, right? Whether it's hard drives failing or whatever. If the backup's suddenly 5 times longer one night than all the previous ones, either there's some giant download or something going wrong with that machine. So, yeah,
Well,
that's
one more small point on that, Paul, is
yeah.
IT pros and even the prosumer and the traditional end user, they can even look on their systray, and there will be an optional little, by default it's there, a little icon that says last backup completed successfully, and it'll look different if that's not the case. So kind of some self-intuitive information is always displayed in a pretty easy spot.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. So it looks like at the moment we have several live viewers. They don't have questions queued up. That could be a good sign. We anticipate a lot of questions, but we couldn't possibly hit everything. We've teased you. There's a lot more in the super guides. Veeam's forums. Can you tell us a little bit about Anton Gostev? And who's involved with it? You laugh, right?
Well, is he one of the attendees? I don't know. It depends. They're changing
maybe, but go ahead. Him in the forums, though, and his history.
Okay, so Anton Gostev is the vice president of product management at Veeam, and product management is the overarching organization that is responsible for development. And he's the guru when it comes to backup. He's the brains behind Veeam backup and replication and endpoint as well. So he also takes the user forums very seriously. I cannot emphasize this enough. Features, new technologies, logic, everything comes. A lot of it comes from what people are doing with the problem. And let me give you kind of an inside peek. Is a software company, and myself, I'm on the product team. So there's product management, a pretty big team. Product strategy, my team, pretty small. And then there's product marketing, pretty small. And so I kind of sit in the middle of these two like that. But whenever we have a new product or a new technology, new release, the product team as a collective group meets months ahead of that. And it's basically when product management, the development team, has something okay to show. And so for those of you who are on Twitter, if you ever hear me refer to the head cracker, that means I'm getting to see the new stuff, okay? The head cracker is my little nickname for that. But whenever Gostev comes in and tells us the new stuff, the very first thing he does is say, okay, what problem does this solve? And this is a fundamentally different approach to new things. It's not one of those things that I want to say, oh, well, this is how we're going to make this much money. No. Other way around. How do we make money? Gostev lives on the forums. He is just Gostev on the forums. I encourage you to sign up for the Veeam forums if you're not there. For one reason above all, you'll get the weekly forum digest email. It's a rundown of a number of things, including the most popular posts. Why not have it all just sent to you on Sunday night? And additionally, you get what's called the word from Gostev. And Gostev works very hard on giving you not just what's new from Veeam, but maybe if there's things from VMware, things from the endpoint area, things from the Hyper-V space, cloud, all kinds of varietal things. It's not limited to what Veeam does by itself, and that's very intentional because we think about a lot of things. We listen to what people want from the forums. Can't encourage you to go to the forums enough, and I can assure you that the people in charge of these products look at those forums, take those comments very seriously. Every single one of them is read, and if you ever want to know, just ask, are they a Veeam R&D person? And chances are they are. So I can't think of a brand where you can have better access right to the top than the Veeam forums. And Twitter, so this guy, he won't let Twitter go either, by the way. He's good at that.
And there you go. So within minutes of me publishing my article, December 5th, my first Veeam article in this recent wave, there was Anton tweeting. It was just, it had me laughing. Not too often a VP would be full-time, reading the forums, absolutely staying on top of them and caring passionately about the product. even though he just came out with Veeam Endpoint Backup and Replication V8 in October. You've had a busy few months. And that's another product I have my eyes on that I wrote about a month ago as one of the many products I'm looking at to back up all my virtual machines in my home as well. And you mentioned the backup and replication repository could be a backup target. So imagine where I have one, say, 5 terabyte data store, and all my backups go there, my physical laptops in various friends and family's houses, as well as the virtual machines right there in my home lab in my basement. And here's the kicker. Unlike Microsoft's product, which won't even install on Windows Server variants, you don't claim this is a server product or enterprise focused at all. Nevertheless, it will install on Windows Server 2012 R2 or 2008 R2. That is interesting to folks that are the type that are listening to this. So
yeah, it's intentional. It's intentional as well, I should clarify, because while Veeam Endpoint Backup Free is solving a problem, it is not all things to all scenarios. So it is not an enterprise physical backup solution, period. I'll take that to the hill right now. But what it is for if you have a couple of non-virtualized systems, or if you have the use case of the home PC and the home server, this is absolutely the right tool. Your laptop, the right tool to consider using. And the best part is that it's free. And this feature and functionality that you see today, we're committed to this type of stuff being available for free forever. Sure, we're going to do more with it. My personal use case, if I was ever going to run something in the cloud, this would be absolutely what I'd put in there. A Windows VM in the cloud. I'd run this on it in a heartbeat. So this is a gateway to a lot of things, so definitely stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you. And you've seen me and my kind of wacky tinkering around in a home lab includes things like a laptop fails and someone in the family. Maybe it's more than just the hard drive. The laptop itself is going out for service. For years now, I'll restore my last good backup, which is daily in my family's case, to a virtual machine, like a ESXi 5.5 hosted virtual machine, and then give remote RDP, remote desktop protocol access to that user for a few days so they can limp along with some other loaned hardware while their laptop's getting repaired. That's not your typical, home user use case, but it shows if you get a little creative, any cloning solution can do a whole lot of backup and restore. Now that HCI standard and hard drives, you don't really get blue screens much anymore with Windows 8, 8.1, and 10. You can pretty much boot on almost anything. You'll deal with some licensing stuff to clean up. But compared to competitors that I've used, Macrium, Acronis, there's a lot out there for basic cloning. This, having the ability to clone to a NAS, a simple Drobo that anyone can run and buy without feeling like they're RAID 5 administrators of any kind, without any central server left on. That's pretty nifty. So someone can have a Drobo and a bunch of machines in the house, as Rick said, and back up his wife's machine straight to the Drobo without leaving some Windows server running. That is a different model, and that's what caught my attention and had me looking into these products, Rick. So thank you for this hour of your time right before the holidays. I really appreciate your doing this, Rick. And
hey,
anything that we should know about how to follow you?
Yeah. On the little Google thinger, I apologize, folks. I'm not the best with Google Hangouts, but it should state on there that you can follow me at Rick Vanover on Twitter myself. I'm also on the team that responds on behalf of Veeam. So the two Twitters that Paul is showing here on the screen, GhostDev, actually, everyone right there, I recommend you follow that whole group. So GhostDev, VP Product Management, definitely follow him. Mike Ressler, he's our EMEA Microsoft evangelist. Well, he's not really EMEA, he's global, but he lives in Europe. And no, it is not reseller, it's Ressler. And then, of course, Veeam is the parent brand, and then myself at Rick Vanover. And we have varying degrees of Twitter, interaction levels. So I just go for the lot here. Maybe add a list for endpoint backup on Veeam and drop these 4 in there.
Okay. You also have veeam.podbean.com. That's a Veeam community podcast.
Veeam podcast. Yep. I'm going to start in the next year and create some content around the endpoint space, so watch that. So if you go to veeam.com and hit community, and then you'll see the podcast listed there, or you could find us on Podbean, drop it in on Stitcher, all those good things. The The podcast is a little side project of mine, but most of the time it's truly community. It's a show's about our guests rather than about us. So it's a pleasure I have to do that, and I get people from all over the world on the podcast.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick. Folks can see my Twitter handle there too. Actually, no, I removed it from the lower third. It's Tinkerer Guy. Tinkerer Guy. So at Tinkerer Guy is how you get me on Twitter. But obviously, you can find all my follow buttons right at tinkertry.com in the upper right corner. Thank you, Rick, for this fun hour together. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. My pleasure, everyone. Thanks for having me, Paul.